before I start, when Andreas Brockman first got in touch and asked me if I wanted to participate in the transmediale, he asked me what I wanted to show, and I said I would like to talk about my extra ear project, but it will not be finished in time. And Andreas said, perfect. With the first suspension performances, the body here is seen as a kind of sculptural medium. Can we have the sound off in this one, please? Just hit, yeah. The body here is suspended in varying situations in differing locations. And in Copenhagen, the body was suspended from ground level. And the embarrassing situation here was that as I was being hoisted up and I was looking down, I realized that people were looking up. In this performance, the stretched skin is a kind of gravitational landscape. This is what it takes for the body to be suspended in a 1G gravitational field. There's very little bleeding except in the thigh area. If you stick the hooks into muscle, you'll get a lot of bleeding. If you avoid muscle, it's generally okay. We edited out all the screaming and the bleeding at the end. I didn't think you'd be interested in seeing that. Okay, the next video clip. The stomach sculpture. In 1993, for the 5th Australian Sculpture Triennale, whose theme was site-specific works, I decided to design a sculpture for the inside of the body. So instead of a sculpture for a public space, this was a sculpture for a private internal space. And here we're testing the mechanism. There's a flashing light, a beeping sound, and the sculpture opens and closes. Closed, it was safely able to be inserted. And it was inserted about 40 centimetres into the stomach cavity. It took 2 days and 6 attempts to shoot the 15 minutes of video. And whereas with the third hand, technology is attached externally to the body, here the body becomes a host for a work of art. So the body is not a site for the self, but simply for a sculpture. The third hand, I did try to do some things like here, writing one word simultaneously with the 3 hands, each hand writing a different letter at the same time. So if you imagine the first 3 letters were E, L and I, V, U and O, O, T and N, you had to keep your 2 eyes on what your 3 hands were doing, and you had to remember the sequence of letters. And because this performance occurred on a sheet of glass between the body and the audience, I had to learn to write it back to front. Next video clip, which is the extended arm. So the sound off. Yeah, okay. The body in the suspension performances was a kind of obsolete body. A body that was contained within its own limited parameters. The invaded body with the sculpture becomes also an empty body. So an obsolete, invaded, and empty body. In this performance, or series of performances, the body performs involuntarily. The left side of my body is actuated by a computer and a muscle stimulation system. So I have no control of the movements of my left arm, whilst on the other side, the body is controlling the extended manipulator with 11 degrees of freedom. In fact, both arms have 11 degrees of freedom. One arm is involuntary, the other arm is extended to primate proportions. This was a 4-hour performance, a continuous performance. It was web streamed. We also constructed a VRML model of the manipulator, and the VRML model mimicked the movements of the mechanical manipulator. So the body was a kind of body installation for 4 hours in which the body is performing as a kind of split body. On the one side you have voltage in, involuntary movements. On the other side, voltage out to actuate an extended manipulator. It didn't take long to realise that we could do this remotely. In 1995, in which an event that Florian was involved in, called Telepolis, we constructed an interface, a touchscreen interface, that enabled the remote controlling of a body in another place. And here, for example, if someone in the Pompidou Centre in Paris, the Media Lab in Helsinki, the Doors of Perception Conference in Amsterdam, my body was in Luxembourg. By touching the muscles on the computer model, the computer simulates the movement, and then a second later in Luxembourg, my body moves accordingly. I could see the face of the person moving me, and simultaneously they could see the body involuntarily moving. This was another kind of split body experience. Instead of using muscle stimulation though, it was an upper body exoskeleton with only 3 degrees of freedom for each arm. Out, across and up. But if these movements are happening simultaneously, then you can have 64 possible combinations of movements. But in this performance called Movatar, what we constructed was an avatar imbued with genetic algorithms whose behaviour evolved during the performance. So as the avatar sort of changed its bodily movements, so it affected my physical body. So in this performance, the upper part of my body was avatar actuated, whilst the lower part was free to perform with my own agency. And in this performance, the body itself becomes a kind of prosthesis, enabling the behaviour of an avatar in the real world. A kind of inverse motion capture system. In motion capture, there are electrodes on this body. If I move, I can activate a computer model. But imagine if the opposite is possible. If an avatar imbued with a rudimentary intelligence can access a physical body and perform with it in the real world. This would be a sort of an interesting interface, an inverse motion capture system. Okay, and exoskeleton. Although the initial interest was in the use of manipulators, I was always intrigued with insect locomotion. And we constructed in Hamburg with a group of artists called F-18, a six-legged walking machine that was able to carry my body. The movements of the machine are controlled by the upper body exoskeleton that allowed the computer to recognize the different arm gestures and thereby select the different leg movements. This performance was a performance where you translate arm movements into machine leg motions. Sound was also important in this performance, the sound registering the motion of the machine, but also indicating the direction and the orientation of the robot. So it was a kind of hybrid human-machine system. Was that if I lifted one leg up, 3 robot legs would lift and swing forward. If I lifted the other leg up, the other 3 legs would lift and swing forward. So simply by stepping up and down on the spot, the machine would walk. Unfortunately, with this particular design, the machine took a few steps forwards and fell over sideways. It was never realized as a successful mechanism. So we tried different kinds of approaches, and the final design of this new walking machine was more in this way, that the body is actually within the chassis of the machine. And what happens here is that the human bipedal gait is translated into this 6-legged walking insect-like machine. And also we used pneumatic rubber muscles. So instead of pneumatic steel actuators, these rubber muscles would expand in girth, contract 20% of their length, producing a strong pulling force. So this kind of muscle machine was used in a performance in London in 2003. So this is in fact much closer to what was the reality of the machine. And with the pneumatic rubber muscles, even though this robot was 5 meters in diameter, it was 200 kilograms lighter than the previous exoskeleton robot. A more recent project is the Walking Head project. This is only a 2-meter diameter robot mounted with an LCD screen imaging a human head. And this robot is a kind of virtual actual system where the behavior, the facial behavior of the computer-generated head is activated and modulated by the leg movements. It had an ultrasound scanning device to detect the presence of anyone in the gallery. So ordinarily the robot is sitting, doing nothing, until someone comes into the gallery. Then the robot detects that person, stands, selects from its library of possible movements, and performs a choreography for a few minutes. Then it sits down and waits for the next person. Sound for this, please. Sound.
Our robotics laboratory at Case Western Reserve University. Our near-term robots use abstracted insect locomotion principles, whereas our advanced legged vehicles are more directly based upon insects. Both of these lines of vehicles can be scaled up or down in size to suit specific mission requirements. Our larger near-term robots use 6 appendages driven by a single motor in a nominal alternating tripod gait, like that used by insects. The 3-spoked appendages, called legs, combine the speed and simplicity of wheels with the climbing mobility of legs. Their legs are compliant so that their gaits adapt to the terrain in a cockroach-like manner. These mechanisms enable the robots to traverse terrain and climb obstacles that would be difficult or impossible for a wheeled vehicle to navigate, at speeds currently unattainable by any legged robot at this scale. A body flexion joint, also found in cockroaches, enables our WEGS robots to surmount more complex obstacles. The compact mini-WEGS uses 4 WEGS in an alternating diagonal gait to sustain speeds of up to 10 body lengths per second over smooth and rough terrain. It uses only 1 motor to drive the WEGS and 1 microservo for steering. Its lightweight and robust construction allows it to sustain repeated falls from a height of over 10 body lengths and tumble down a flight of stairs with no damage. Crickets and click beetles use jumping to surmount obstacles of immense relative size. A version of mini-WEGS has been developed based on this concept. It can surmount obstacles 2 to 3 body lengths in height. Or reviews unmanned ground vehicles being developed in.
Okay, so I show this video because it's an interesting and creative hybridization of wheels and legs. It's very difficult to get a fast-moving robot, and they succeed in this research. This is done in Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. The leading researcher there is Roger Quinn. And the other interesting thing with the smaller WEGS robots is there's no up or down. So the robot can equally move whether it's upside down or right side up. And that's very, very interesting. So it's the combination of wheels and legs, the speed of the robot, and that there is no up or down in the construction of the mechanism. In a recent project with another artist, Nina Sellers, both of us underwent surgical operations to remove biomaterial from each of our bodies. It was a kind of collaboration that was the result of physically subtracting from each body. And this is the amount of material collected from the two artists. The contents of this material was a combination of peripheral nerve endings, subcutaneous fat, connective tissue, xylocaine, O-positive blood. The body tissue we had great difficulty in accessing the contents of our operations. It was very difficult to legally obtain the material. It's very interesting. Inside your body, the material is fine, but if it's externalized, all of a sudden it becomes biohazardous. So obtaining the material was very, very difficult. We constructed an installation which we called Blender. And this was an installation that was human height. This contained the biomaterial with a blender and 4 oxygen tanks that intermittently bubbled through the blended material and also actuated the blender blades. So this material from the 2 artists was constantly being blended. It's a kind of the opposite to the stomach sculpture. Whereas the stomach sculpture contained this bit of robotic technology, here it's a machine that contains a liquid body, but it's a body that is a composite body from 2 artists. And you can see the layers of material, protein down the bottom. This was xylocaine. Any fatty material floated to the top. And then about every 5 minutes, the blending would occur and the material would gradually settle again. So this is the scale of the machine. Okay. Can we go to the extra ear? So this project was first visualized in about 1996. And it's taken almost 10 years to find surgical assistants to realise the project. Initially, the ear was, I imagined the ear to be beside my real ear. But when I showed this 3D model to my doctor friends, they advised me that this was not a very good position. Firstly, the bundle of nerves that come out of the skull into the face emanate from about this area. So there was the problem of maybe paralysing half of my face in doing any operation in constructing the ear in that position. Secondly, this is also next to my jawbone. So of course every time I chew or I speak, the ear would wiggle. This would be an unintended side effect. And so anatomically and aesthetically, unfortunately, this was not a suitable position. In 2003 in Perth, with the assistance of Tissue Culture and Art Project and Symbiotica, we decided to grow a series of ears